It looks like we've got Brian Almon on. We got to bring him on. Hey, my man, he's out there in the wilderness today. He's on the beat. He's sniffing. He must be sniffing it out. Hey, Brian, good to see you, man. What was your take on that bill this morning that failed 7-7?
Well, it's getting frustrating seeing those same bills fail over and over and over, isn't it? Especially now that we have an ally of election integrity in the White House, somebody who is very acquainted with what can go wrong with mail-in voting. President Trump has made it part of his agenda to push for same-day, election day only voting, and we still have some Republicans in Idaho who are not getting on board that train. It is frustrating. We'll just have to keep coming back and trying to make that happen. Everybody always has an excuse as to why we need more expansive absentee ballots or mail-in ballots. And it seems like there's an expectation that it's okay to have some risk of fraud as long as we make it easy for everybody. Well, who said voting should be easy? Honestly, it's a very solemn and sacred duty that we have as citizens of a republic, and we should we should take it seriously rather than treating it like just anything else that comes in the junk mail.
Yeah, absolutely. And your point about the Trump coming out and this is part of his platform to just ditch all of this stuff and go to single day paper ballots. I mean, that's if you're pushing back on this now, it's really starting to reveal, who in the legislature is going to be pushing back against even that when we get to that point, if we can get to that point. But yeah, so it's very frustrating. So like I said, we'll talk with Joe Alfieri, representative up in CD4 and figure it out. Okay, some other things that showed up. Another bill that failed to even get printed this morning was an interesting bill. I think it was Representative Kaler presented a bill to completely, almost completely remove all funding and remove all relationships between the state and public television, public broadcasting. Did you get a chance to look at this bill a little bit?
I've seen a little bit of it, and I saw a little bit of the hearing this morning. Obviously, this is something that I think I don't remember if it actually got in the platform, but it's something that the Republican Party has been looking at. At the national level, we see PBS and NPR, and they're very left wing. NPR is an anti-conservative voice right now, and yet it's funded by tax dollars. Here in Idaho, we have Idaho Public Television, which carries some of the NPR and some of the PBS stuff, and so it's something that I think Republicans and conservatives have been looking at. Perhaps this morning's bill needed a little bit of work to get some more people on board.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. The chairman of the committee, although today he was acting as, I think, vice chair while Representative Scott chaired the committee, but nonetheless, he had some advice or some observations for Representative Kaler regarding how this bill was drafted for today. So let's listen to a little bit of that.
Representative Crane, 13.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Kaler. You can see the committee's struggling with how the funding of this is going to work. So your fiscal note says that it's going to save the taxpayers about $4 million. And I think your testimony said that that's roughly 30%. So is it a $12 million budget that Idaho Public Television has? $4 million of that is provided by the state, and the remaining $8 million is provided by donations and maybe federal dollars. And so is it that $8 million you're thinking is going to be able to keep them up and rolling if they're not doing all this periphery broadcasting?
Representative Kaler.
Madam Chairman, Representative Crane, thank you for the question. I do not have a specific number answer to provide at this time. I would be happy to follow up, though, if this bill does get a second hearing to give you those exact figures, if I may.
Follow up.
Thank you, Representative Kaler. I'm trying to help you out here. I'm trying to give you a lifeline. You can see you're in trouble in the committee, and you're asking us to go ahead and print this with information you don't have. And that becomes very difficult for a committee to do, even people like myself that might be sympathetic to what you're trying to do. When we don't have the numbers, you kind of need to come prepared, ready to go on those type of things. So I'm sympathetic to what you're trying to do here, but you're asking me to make a decision on something that you don't have any information on. And that makes it very problematic for us as members to take that leap of faith.
That was a comment, so you don't have to respond.
Yeah. So there you have it, Brian. A little bit. I mean, I guess walk us through. Sometimes this happens where a bill is not ready for prime time, right?
Yeah, and I do feel a bit bad for Representative Kaler there. It was brought to him by a constituent who is involved in the political process and wants to see some of these changes, which the aims are definitely good. But this also shows why it's there's more to the process than just writing a good bill and presenting it. You got to talk to the folks on the committee. You got to talk to leadership sometimes. You want to get as much buy-in as you can, so when you step out there, you're not just hung out to dry like that. When they come up with unexpected questions, you want to get those questions before you even get to the print hearing is really what you want to do, because otherwise, it ends up like today.
Yeah, well, that's a little rough around the edges there. So we'll keep trying at it, because again, this is the spirit of Doge, right? If we could just defund something, and especially something that generally speaking can work against our own issues, that's especially at the national level with NPR and such. That's a good thing. So, I do want to mention something. Is it Boise State Radio that does that public survey every year?
I'm not sure. I know someone from Boise State does a survey.
Yeah, and I feel like it's published through the Boise State Public Radio, which is basically like the NPR of Idaho, right, so to speak. So, and their methods, they've always been criticized that their methods of collecting answers on those surveys is they don't poll voters or likely voters. They poll everybody. They poll residents. They just if you're in Idaho, you could be living in Wisconsin and going to school in Idaho and answer this poll, and it be taken as if you have a long-term interest in Idaho, which is usually what voters are. We want to hear from voters on issues, not necessarily your every average Joe who just happens to live here and doesn't vote or doesn't even have an interest in here. So anyway,
well, I think we need to be careful with this idea that just because some people like something doesn't mean government needs to fund it. There's a reasonable purpose for Idaho Public TV. They'll broadcast the legislature. You can go there and watch the House, the session. That's what we use. We watch the Idaho in session, and that seems reasonable for taxpayers to pay so that we can all see what's going on in our own government. But do we need, do we need cartoons to be funded by the government? I think there's an entire private sector out there that will publish cartoons, even educational ones. We don't necessarily need tax dollars supporting that, much less the anti-American nonsense that you sometimes see on things like NPR.
Yeah. All right. Well, yep. Gotcha. All right, Brian. Well, let's everybody know what you're working on this week, what you're paying attention to, and where people can follow you.
Yeah, well, so at Gem State Brian on Twitter, gemstatechronicle.com. Last week there were these 4 bills that were introduced about libel and false advertising in campaigns and rewriting campaign finance, rewriting the lobbyist rules. They're very deep and thick, and I'm going to try and work through those and bring some analysis so that we can know if there's anything good in there or not, or if it's just bad. We'll see.
Yes,
I think we're going to get a mixed bag, honestly.
Yeah. It always seems to go that way. All right. Well, he's out. That's it. Done. Battery died. All right, Brian.